This is some stuff I really like. It's about perspective. You can change your perspective in a moment, but there are some things that were brought to you by people that raised you, by people that educated you, by certain books and fundamental texts you may have read, and you don't find them as exciting as you used to, perhaps. I don't know, maybe they feel a little small. A lot of people come here to Unity as a result of wanting to see a bigger perspective of what this life is all about. You know, it's a wonderful thing to be able to see beyond what it is you used to see, to be able to grow into something new and different, a new way of seeing things. And when I read this perspective-changing idea in Ken Wilber's Integral Spirituality, I thought to myself, now this is really cool. I'm going to give you a little bit of that. Ken Wilber's a philosopher, a psychologist, a scientist, a writer, a speaker. He came up with something called integral theory. Anybody here ever heard of integral theory? All right, well, if you have, that's wonderful. Unity actually teaches it nowadays. And they teach integral ministry in the School of Ministry. And I really appreciate that they've moved into that space where they're able to look at things from all angles, because that's what integral work is all about. It's all about seeing things from multiple perspectives. You know, not just being locked into the way you see something that's important in life, but being able to see it as somebody else might see it. Being able to step into that situation where somebody is not perhaps as advanced maybe as you, doesn't see life in the same way as you do, have the same experiences you do, which brought you to a newer understanding, and say, yes, that's part of the journey. I recognize and understand that perspective. In fact, I still have it deep down there somewhere, you know, because as I move forward in changing my perspective and become more enlightened, I not only understand things I couldn't understand before, but I also include those thoughts, feelings, and understandings that I had before. I actually become a more whole person. Integral theory is exciting. And when I found out that Unity has been integrating integral theory into the way they look at the teaching of religion, of spirituality, I was really excited. I found that out while I was in school for Unity, becoming a Unity minister. I've been a licensed, ordained religious science minister for years and years and years. And when I stepped into this position here, it was required that I go to seminary for Unity. And I did that. And I love the perspective change. I love the difference in perspective, the wider range of materials. And one of the things I learned was the 5 pillars of ministry. The 5 pillars of ministry begins with the Fillmores, and I'm not going to go through them all, but it begins with the Fillmores. As a minister, we take a look at the Fillmores, and we see what they can bring to our understanding of this thing that is a singular thing. Unity, of course, is all about oneness, and the Fillmores brought some intense writings and materials to us around this, a way of seeing the world, a way of being in the world that would bring us to that space where we could actually feel the divine in us, where we could actually sort of look in the mirror and go, wow, you know, I am doing some things that are actually allowing me to unfold as the example Jesus was brought to me. So the Fillmores are really instrumental in bringing forth this idea that we've been given a pattern, a way to see the world and a way to see life that would really bring about the divinity in each and every one of us. I think that's the power behind Unity's teaching. But then they go on to say this in the second pillar, the integral approach, which is really this and something else. We grow into understanding. The second pillar is a recognition that individual and collective consciousness goes through various stages of unfoldment. When it comes to facilitating unfoldment, one size does not fit all. And it helps to have a structured, holistic, mission-centered approach that meets the needs of those various stages and looks at ministry as a whole living system. Wow, that can be confusing. But what it's saying is that there are different religions out there, and we pay attention to them. There are different ways of thinking about God, about life out there, and we pay attention to them. We don't just discard them because they don't fall in lockstep with what it is we say we believe. And we recognize that there is this desire in the world to bring about an alignment with the power that is God, to bring about an alignment with the power that is life, the power that is love. And over the years, there have been different and various ways to do that. There are different religions, there are different philosophies, and most of them are leaning toward this idea of alignment with that which is true, with that which is beautiful. And so religions are born, philosophies are born, and dogmas are created. And some of these religions fight with each other because they say, I'm the only one, and you're not that. That the things that you believe are contrary to the truth, that there is a whole different way to believe out there, and if you don't believe that, something bad is going to happen to you. Not just here, but in a later day. Lots of religions, and I don't blame them for this, believe that their religion is the only truth there is. But that's a level of thinking. That's a level of thinking that does not bespeak integral thinking, integral thought process, which allows us to see other perspectives, to lay them out on the table and see if there's any truth in them. I mean, that's what integral work is all about. See, let's just take a look at these things, lay them on the table, and pick the stuff out that's true, and see if we can't utilize it to make our life better. Ken Wilber, who brought about integral philosophy, integral thought, says that nobody's smart enough to be wrong 100% of the time, which I think is really funny. I mean, I really do think that's a funny statement. Nobody's smart enough to be wrong all the time, which means that some people are right. I mean, everybody's right sometimes. Like a clock that doesn't work, it's right twice a day. So nobody's smart enough to be wrong 100% of the time, but that means there's some truth in everything. There is some truth in everything. And our real mission is to figure out what that truth is. Let me give you an example of that. So, there are fundamentalist Christians, and by the way, just by definition, unity does not espouse fundamental Christianity. We don't take a look at the Bible as a fundamental text that is inerrant. We take a look at it as a book or a library of books that allows us to see some interesting things in the people and the characters and the situations which can guide us and help us in today's life. It's not intended that every word be true, but it's intended that we get at least a feeling that there's a way for us to move through this as there was a way for the people and the characters in the Bible that moved through their situations. Now, you could probably understand that you can get that message even if none of it's true. Even if none of that fundamental text, the Bible, is true. If it's just a book of stories, it doesn't matter. What it does is that it shows us something about life. That's looking at the book, the Bible, metaphysically. How were we at one point in time this character? Let's use the prodigal son. How was I the father in this situation? The one that did not understand the needs of his child, yet the one that opened his arms up, even though he was, he was asked to do some things that a father shouldn't have to do, like act as if he was dead and hand his son, his inheritance before he died. And when that son went out and did the things that he did and spent the money the way that he spent it and ended up feeding hogs and wanting to come home, he welcomed him back to his house. I mean, who does that? Well, this character did that. And can we see ourselves in that? Have we been that character before? More to the point, have we been the prodigal son before? Have we asked for something that we shouldn't have asked for? Have we done some things we shouldn't have done? Have we asked for forgiveness or stepped back into a situation and wanted it to be different? Had the courage to do that? Yeah, absolutely. Have we been the other brother before? The one that was so angry that his father had welcomed the prodigal son back. and who asked them to bring out the fatted calf and let's have a celebration. And he'd never done that for that son who was dutiful and stuck around and didn't do the things that the prodigal son had done. And it seemed that the father was giving him everything. Oh, he was angry and resentful. Have we been that? Yeah, we have. We have been that. Do we have situations that are exactly as that is? No, we don't. I mean, we don't, but we can fit ourselves into that by the way we feel when these things happen. We can bring ourselves to that place where we make better decisions as a result of knowing that story. I mean, I can feel that. I know that. I know that. And that's what I'm supposed to do in integral philosophy, by the way. So listen, if there's a fundamental text that says that the world was created in 7 days, doggone it, some people say the world was created in 7 days. And they figure out through the Bible that it was 6,000 years ago that happened. And people who are scientists look around and say, wow, that's crazy. That's just crazy. I mean, we have scientific records which say that this planet is X number of billion years old. We have scientific proof that our galaxy, at least, has been around for 11, 12 billion years, and that perhaps something like the Big Bang happened 14.5 billion years ago. I mean, we have scientific proof that this happened, yet there's a group of people, a lot of them, say that it happened 6 days, in 7 days, because the seventh day was a day of rest, in 7 days, and it happened 6,000 years ago. Well, what we need to do is we need to take a look at what it is that's being said by both, throw it on the table, and pick out what's true. Now, they're not both completely true. They're not both, they can't be. I mean, science is yet to learn everything it needs to know. But neither of them are completely true, but there's some truth in each. We need to pick the truth out, and we can leave the rest. I mean, it's, in my mind, it's pretty obvious that the earth is older than 6,000 years, that it wasn't created, that the universe was not created 6,000 years ago, and that to stand on that makes your religion less true. I mean, that's the way I feel about that, but it certainly shows a closed mind. So that's a perspective. That's a perspective that they sit with, and one day perhaps they will change their own perspective, but it won't happen because I tell them that it's wrong. It won't. It absolutely will not, because it's ingrained. It's almost in their DNA. So Ken Wilber came up with this idea that there's a way to look at this thing called God that doesn't necessarily depend upon a bunch of certain factors that you have to say are true. It is called the 1-2-3 method, or the 3-2-1 method, because I'm going to start with 3 first, which is the 3 faces of God. So the idea is that there are different ways to look at something. And we know that because we were taught as kids in school that there is a first perspective, a second-person perspective, and a third-person perspective. Do you remember all that? I think was that in grammar or English, or one of those that we paid some attention to but not complete attention to, but we know that there's a different way of looking at things depending upon which person is telling the story. So we have a slide here that I want to put up that is a picture from the Webb telescope. And that telescope depicts the universe in part, some millions of light years away from where we are today. I mean, when you look at that, you see and feel a large space, do you not? I mean, you see something that's huge. You get the feeling that there's something to this thing called life that is way beyond what we can even fathom. This is a third-person perspective of God. Many of us come into unity and start the process of understanding what we believe here by getting a view, an internal view of this idea of God as all that is, as the universe. And maybe even once we move a little farther, we understand that it's the power back of that too. It's a transcendent power that's not only everything that is, but it's the power behind it. That's a third-person perspective. You take a look at that and you say, wow, God as infinite, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. The infinite is right here before us. We're living in this infinite right now. In this we live and move and have our being. Have you ever heard that before? In this we live and move and have our being. Yeah, it's from Acts. It's from the book of Acts. And you know, that's a pretty interesting perspective for Paul to have taken when he said that. In God we live and move and have our being, because all of a sudden you see this wider vision in your own mind of what this thing called God can be. And so we look at God from time to time as all that is, the universe, that which is infinite in nature. Everything we see, everything we feel, everything that will ever be, everything that ever has been is in this soup, this substance of what we call God with a third-person perspective. I mean, that's big. I mean, the question I oftentimes ask people is whether your God is big enough. And they go, oh, yeah, it's big enough. I have a Savior, and that's good, and all I need is that, and we're going to go to heaven, and where's that? I don't know. And all of those conversations are kind of interesting, but the smallness of that experience of God oftentimes is troubling for them, and they'll admit as much. You know, this seems very, very small. It's like I live this life this way, and then I die, and then I go here, and, you know, there's really nothing more to be gained rather than try and do the things that are necessary for me to get there and not go someplace else, which is, you know, where you don't want to go. So people will say the experience has been small for me and I want something larger, and they'll end up here. Do you have a larger experience of God when we talk about these things? If you see God as all that is and the power behind it, the power back of it, do you feel a larger experience of God? You do. I mean, I sort of see this picture inside of me. You know, this idea that God is all things, everything. That God is my feelings and the way I feel about it. God is every single religion and expression. Now, that's something we have to understand. That if we take this viewpoint that God is infinite, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, then God is every single expression of religion. Every one. They're ideas. And it's funny how these ideas were brought about, too. I mean, it used to be that we were tribes all over the world. There were different places that people went to worship. There were different ideas, different languages that people worshiped in and around. And so different religions were born. You know, different ideas of God were put together. And not all of them fell in line with one another. I mean, they were different. Put up slide number 2. Here's a little picture of how some of these turned out. I mean, look at that. There's Jesus there. There's Hote. You see Hote? Hote's in my office. You go see Hote in the office, you'll see him. Yeah, and then you've got Ganesh. The elephant is Ganesh. I mean, he's a Hindu god. Love Ganesh, you know, the idea of Ganesh. You know what his job is? His job is to move immovable objects, which really are those things we can't see. So Ganesh gets into our mind and moves those thoughts that no longer serve us. That's Ganesh's job, to push him right out the door. You know, there are very few people nowadays, even Hindus, that believe that Ganesh is really a god. I mean, that Ganesh is up in the sky or wherever Ganesh hangs out. No, but they get the idea, you see. They get the idea. They see Ganesh metaphysically or metaphorically. Very cool. Very cool. Hindus and Buddhists and Christians can all move through a gradual evolutionary process which allows them to have a bigger view of God. I mean, it happens. It happens through this growth period where we pay attention to it and see what seems to be true, and we start to move in a direction that allows us to get more of that information. So the reason why I put this second slide up was because it's indicative of a different perspective. It's indicative of a second-person perspective rather than the third-person perspective of the infinite. This is what I call the intimate, meaning these are gods that you can nestle up to, see? And at a level of development in life, it becomes necessary for us to feel like we're cared about. In fact, We're to have a personal relationship with Jesus if we're a member of certain types of Christian churches. We're to have a personal relationship with each of these individuals depending upon what sect we are engaged in or what religious ideology we're practicing. That's a second-person perspective, by the way. That perspective says that there's something other than me, which is containing and utilizing all of the power. The sort of thing where we say God is out there somewhere. The sort of thing that we say when we pray to God and beg God out there somewhere to do something for us. These are your guys. You know, these are the yous. Those are the things that are separate from you, yet not as big as the universe, which is a third-person perspective. This is a second-person perspective. And it's very interesting because this one is, as Ken Wilber says, the one that is controversial. This second-person perspective is controversial. And Ken Wilber is a guy that you would expect would believe in this, in the third-person perspective, which is that God is everything and the power behind it. And he does. But he also believes in the second-person perspective because he knows that at some point in time in our lives we're going to need that personal relationship in the sense that I want to be able to lean on something. Let's say Jesus. We have people in this room that really love to pray to Jesus, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that in unity or any new thought. Nothing wrong with it at all because you need the comfort and connection and spiritual alignment with something that just feels right. Just feels right. Now that's a healthy way to use the second-person perspective. But it's unhealthy, says Ken Wilber, and says unity, when you take a look at it and say that's the only way to look at God. It becomes unhealthy. And it becomes even more unhealthy when you see this God that is outside of you, that is other than you, not only does things for you, but does things to you. Meaning, you say you love me, but you're going to send me to hell because I'm born sinful. You say that God is love, yet you're willing to sentence me to an infinite time frame of pain and suffering in a lake of fire. That is an unhealthy perspective. The punishment aspect, the believe this or else aspect, doesn't ever seem to me that there's been much God in that. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's never seemed to work for me. This whole idea of a dualistic spiritual foundation, which there's heaven and there's hell. If you do what we want you to do, you go to heaven. If you don't do that, you go to hell. And it's for eternity. I mean, even if you don't know about what you're supposed to know, you live in a country that does not have any access to education or people that might come in and teach you something. The fact that you don't know it is going to send you to hell itself. I remember being taught that in Sunday school. I mean, I would ask questions like, what's going to happen to the people who have never heard about this Jesus person? Well, sorry, I don't make the rules. You know, it's not for me to decide because it's already been decided. That second-person perspective is unhealthy. But the perspective, that second-person perspective of comfort and love and caring and compassion is a healthy way when you need it. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Let me tell you this little story. So there is Myrtle Fillmore, who oftentimes would recommend that the people she was working with, they sent letters to her, by the way, and those letters are in a book called The Letters of Myrtle Fillmore. They sent letters to her and say, what should I do in this situation? And she often recommended, because they were so depressed and downcast, that they write a letter to God and feel the closeness of God. And she did that because she knew that it would start the process of people depending upon God and understanding that there is a power out there. They'll feel better about it, about themselves, about their circumstances, and know that this too will move through, will pass. And so that's a healthy way to use that second-person perspective. Here's another one for you. This is a great little story, and I remember feeling the chill of this one, but it's the footsteps in the sand. Do you know what that is? The little poem Footsteps in the Sand, where it starts out where there are two sets of footprints. One of them is described as my own, and the other one is described as God, and all of a sudden there's only one set of footprints. And, the question becomes, where'd you go, God? Oh, I've been there all along. When you were going through that hard time, I carried you, and so you're only seeing my footsteps. Now, you can get a chill on that one, can't you? I don't care what you believe, you can get a chill on that one. That's healthy second-person perspective. All right, so now first-person perspective. This is really, really interesting. This is God as you. God as you. So this one is a lot of fun for me because I teach this a lot. You see, when people read the Lord's Prayer, I always say to myself, this is a great recitation of exactly what it is I believe about each and every one of us as an expression of God. We are God in form. God, which is all that is, created all that is here, and that includes me, out of itself. Richard Rohr, a Catholic, says, God so loved you that he simply became you. And I absolutely love that. We were created in the image and likeness of God. Now, this one here, this Joseph Murphy statement, which depicts the first-person perspective, the perfection of God is now being expressed through me, is perfect first-person perspective. That I have the ability, because I've been made in the image and likeness of God, God doesn't make any junk, to do the things that I need to do in order to bring about what I need to see. And if it's not happening, you got to look within. See, the Lord's Prayer, it says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. All right, so God lives in heaven. The Father, which would be a second-person perspective, lives in heaven. But he also said after this, it is the Father within that doeth the work. Which means two things. That God resides in you, and that's your heaven, baby. Right there, this is what you need to fix. I mean, if you're not finding heaven in your life, then this interior experience is what you need to change. And what you might be able to change. And you can change it through prayer because we already talked about that in the 3-minute question. Wasn't that a beautiful question? That 3-minute question talked about prayer. And I said, prayer changes the mind of the person praying. That's an inside job. That's where all the stuff is happening. We talked last week about let there be light. That's an interior light. That's an inner light. That's the light that each of us carries. That's the light of God. You are God in expression, first person. Very empowering to understand that. Very empowering to practice that. So you got the first person's perspective, incredibly empowering. You got the second person perspective for comfort and joy. You got the third person perspective for the infinite and allness. And if you can use all three of those and go this and, then you're a spiritual genius. And you know what? I know you can. I know you're not the one that says, oh, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. God is all there is, and your baloney, God is outside of you stuff doesn't work. Well, it might work when you need it to work. It might be something that you can utilize. Don't throw it away just because it's not what you've been taught. Take a look at it. Sift through it. Is there any truth there? Is there any utility in it? And if not, for now, just discard it. You'll come back to it. First person, second person, third person, 1, 2, 3. Interesting, isn't it? It is. Perspective is the key to life. And I know what your perspective is, by the way, because I've spent enough time with you. I know your perspective is that you see life as joyful, as beautiful, as connective, as a way to be compassionate and loving to others. You see life as a way to actually operate as the divine right here and right now, and doggone it, that's what the example Jesus asked us to do. Life is great. Life is so cool. We have our ups and downs. We do. But it's usually how I respond to them that makes all the difference. And so when I say this to you, this just means I love you. When I say, it doesn't mean that I'm a Hindu, it doesn't mean I'm Buddhist, but I am. Namaste.